When a relationship ends, the sense of loss is not simply a feeling of sadness in the heart. The brain interprets it as if the body has just endured a physical injury. When someone walks away, the nervous system immediately releases a storm of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This isn't random, is an ancient survival mechanism etched into us over thousands of years. In early human history, separation from the tribe meant danger, even death. The brain, designed to prioritize survival, has preserved this alarm system. That is why the end of an intimate bond, whether romantic or social, is processed as a threat to existence. The same regions of the brain that register physical wounds also light up when experiencing abandonment. The result is an invisible wound that feels every bit as real as a broken bone. This explains why, after a breakup, people check their phones obsessively, as though a single message could rescue them from the void. It is not weakness, it is biology. The brain is sounding a survival alarm. Danger, connection, lost. The nervous system spirals into crisis, searching frantically for ways to restore safety. This reaction runs even deeper into the attachment system formed in early childhood. From the very first years of life, humans develop strategies to cope with separation and unmet needs. These early patterns become attachment styles, and they awaken once more in the face of loss. Those with anxious attachment often cling desperately, analyzing every conversation, replaying every detail, searching for hidden clues. They may reach out to mutual friends or invent ways to cross paths, not from persistence, but from a nervous system determined to regain proximity. On the other hand, avoidant individuals appear calm, even indifferent, yet inside their inner world is chaos. Their system processes pain slowly, and sometimes months later, when the storm finally breaks through their defenses, they reach out at unexpected hours. Ironically, the people who look the strongest in the immediate aftermath are often the ones in the most turmoil. Many learned early in life that showing need was dangerous, so they perfected the art of performing independence. Their social mask says, "I am fine," but their nervous system is screaming for safety just as loudly as anyone else's. Evolutionary instinct makes no distinction between an ancient tribe and a modern social circle. That sudden Instagram story, the smiling photo posted hours after a breakup hit, is not a sign of true resilience. It is a signal broadcast to the community. I still have value. I still belong. For the brain, survival has always meant belonging. Being pushed out of the circle of connection feels like exile from safety itself. This is why heartbreak feels not just emotional, but existential. It is not only the loss of a person, but the triggering of deep biological fears to the nervous system, abandonment, whispers of danger, vulnerability, and even death. And because of this, logical advice rarely penetrates the storm. Telling someone to move on makes as little sense to their body as telling a bleeding wound to stop hurting. The brain is not choosing this response. It is fighting for survival, the only way it knows. When someone you depended on disappears, the pain is magnified by another force of human psychology: loss, aversion. Our minds are wired to feel the sting of loss twice as intensely as the pleasure of gain. It is not melodrama, it is cognitive math. The thrill of falling in love, the joy of building shared memories, the warmth of companionship, those experiences matter deeply. But when the bond breaks, the nervous system does not simply subtract those joys. It multiplies the absence. registering the loss as catastrophic. This is why people who once seemed calm and rational suddenly become obsessed with closure. The brain resists accepting that the loss is permanent because the psychological cost feels unbearable. To avoid this toll, the mind invents reasons to hope. It clings to what-ifs and maybes, searching for loopholes in reality. Sometimes this looks like bargaining, making deals with oneself or with the universe. If I wait exactly 2 weeks, they will miss me. If I change myself in just the right way, they will return. At other times, it becomes an outward performance. Grand gestures, sudden promises, or even lifestyle shifts appear overnight. These are not spontaneous acts of growth. They are desperate attempts to prevent the loss from becoming final. The person is not really trying to win love. They are trying to halt the hemorrhage of value their mind perceives. And yet, the cruel irony is that loss aversion blinds people to possibility. By fighting so hard to avoid losing, they fail to see what might be gained in letting go. Many cling fiercely to relationships that were never nourishing, rewriting history so that painful experiences vanish and only a highlight reel remains. The brain edits reality, transforming flawed connections into golden memories. This mental editing process is called idealization. It serves a protective function, but it also distorts. Frustrations and incompatibilities vanish from memory, while fleeting moments of kindness are polished into shining symbols of what could have been. Strangely enough, the more toxic the relationship, the stronger this idealization tends to be. When things were genuinely good, memories are balanced. When they were harmful, the brain doubles down on fantasy, painting the lost partner as the one who got away. Idealization is not really about the person who left. It is about the one who remains, avoiding the difficult task of examining their own choices. It is easier to long for a perfect illusion than to face the reality of why the bond was not sustainable. Attempts to explain or justify rarely succeed. Because they are not addressing reality at all, they are confronting a fantasy built by the nervous system to soften unbearable loss. While this fantasy unfolds, defense mechanisms rise like shields. These are the mind's emergency airbags, deploying instantly to protect the ego from impact. Rationalization is common. We were never truly compatible anyway. Suddenly, deal breakers that never mattered before are retroactively discovered, offering a comforting explanation that the breakup was inevitable. Projection often follows. They were just afraid of commitment, shifting the responsibility away from one's own worth. And denial can be the most enduring defense, insisting that the split is temporary, that reconciliation is just around the corner. Beneath all of these strategies lies a fragmenting sense of self. A relationship is not just a connection between two people, it is part of identity. Losing it leaves gaps in the story of who one is. Defense mechanisms are not flaws but survival protocols, short-term shelters against collapse. The danger is that they delay real healing. They hold the pain at bay but also prevent growth, keeping the person tethered to illusions instead of guiding them forward. Sometimes, the most compassionate act is not to play along with another's defense. To refuse denial, projection, or bargaining is to invite them toward the harder, truer work of grieving. It is only in facing the raw wound directly that healing begins. Yet for many, this confrontation feels unbearable, and so they circle in loops of rationalization and fantasy, prolonging their suffering even as they try to escape it. As the first wave of shock subsides, the mind often shifts into bargaining mode. This is the stage where logic begins to dissolve, replaced by a restless search for loopholes. People imagine elaborate scenarios in which their actions could reverse what has happened. If I reach out at just the right moment, if I give space for exactly the right length of time, if I become the person they once hoped I would be, then perhaps the story can be rewritten. This internal negotiation soon spills outward. Some attempt dramatic gestures, unexpected gifts, or sudden declarations of change. Others adopt new habits overnight, as though transforming themselves into a version that could win love back. But these efforts are not about genuine growth. They are about regaining control in a situation defined by powerlessness. The bargaining process is less about the other person and more about resisting the unbearable truth. Some things cannot be negotiated. The tragedy is that energy spent on bargaining could become fuel for healing. Instead, it is poured into strategies and schemes, keeping the heart tethered to hope long after the relationship has ended. People become strategists of love rather than students of grief, constructing endless possibilities that prevent them from confronting the reality of loss. Alongside bargaining comes another upheaval: the collapse of social identity. A relationship is rarely private. It is woven into the fabric of community, friendships, family networks, even public image. When the bond breaks, the ripples spread far beyond to individuals. Suddenly, conversations shift from we to I. Habits once shared must be relearned alone. Even language betrays the absence, and the simplest moments feel unsteady without the anchor of partnership. The awkwardness spreads into social circles. Friends struggle to navigate loyalties. Invitations become delicate, sometimes divided. For the one left behind, each interaction is a reminder that their place in the web of connection has changed. What once felt stable now becomes a diplomatic maze, where every gathering threatens to highlight the absence. Yet the most painful layer of this identity crisis is not social confusion. It is the loss of validation. Being chosen by another human being carries weight in the eyes of the group. It says, "I am worthy. I am wanted." When that bond dissolves, the validation dissolves with it, and the person is left wondering if their value has diminished. This is one reason rebound relationships form so quickly. They are not truly about replacing the lost connection, but about restoring social identity, to once again be seen as someone desired, someone chosen. This turbulence sets the stage for a dramatic shift in power. Every relationship has an invisible structure of influence. The one who cares less often carries more control. When someone decides to leave, they claim the power entirely. The balance tilts, and the other is left in the vulnerable position of wanting what they cannot have. For those who are used to holding control, this reversal can be devastating. The loss is not only emotional but ego-shattering. To lose influence over another's feelings, to no longer shape their world, is to confront the fragility of one's own importance. In the wake of this, people sometimes lash out. They attempt to reclaim control through manipulation, promises, or even efforts to provoke jealousy. But beneath every attempt lies the same truth. They are no longer the center of the other's world, and the emptiness of that realization can be unbearable. The healthiest response to such a shift is acceptance, acknowledging that power has changed hands, and letting go with dignity. Yet this requires self-awareness and maturity that many struggle to summon in the throes of heartbreak. For most, the instinct is to resist, to claw back what has been lost, even at the cost of dignity. The paradox is clear. True power is not control, but the ability to release without destruction. This is the threshold between clinging and transformation. When someone can accept both the loss of identity and the shift of power without resorting to endless bargaining or manipulation, they begin to glimpse the path of growth. It is a path littered with grief, but lined with possibility. For though the departure of a loved one feels like devastation, it can also become the spark of profound change. What feels like destruction often hides the seeds of transformation. The paradox of heartbreak is that losing someone can become the very catalyst for growth that would never have happened otherwise. In relationships, it is easy to fall into comfort, to let another person fill the gaps in our emotional development. But when that presence is removed, what was once outsourced must be reclaimed. Suddenly, emotional regulation becomes an individual task rather than a shared responsibility. A person who once leaned on their partner for stability now has to learn how to soothe themselves. Hobbies and interests that faded into the background must be rediscovered. Social connections that were neglected are rebuilt out of necessity. And perhaps most importantly, the relationship with the self must be strengthened. For some, this is the first time they have been forced to truly meet themselves without distraction. The irony is striking. Those who crumble most intensely after a breakup are often the ones most in need of independence. They are given the painful gift of necessity, the demand to grow. Rebounds may offer temporary relief, but they short-circuit this process. By skipping the solitude, they skip the growth, returning quickly to dependency rather than standing on their own. True healing requires a pause, a reckoning with the self, before reaching again for connection. But the storm does not only distort selfhood in the present, it twists time itself. Memory becomes unreliable, reshaping the past into a golden narrative. Arguments and incompatibilities vanish, while moments of tenderness are polished until they shine unrealistically bright. The brain becomes a biased storyteller, editing the relationship into a tale of tragic perfection. This distortion reaches into the future as well. Dreams once shared suddenly dissolve, leaving behind empty spaces where plans used to be. The future, once expansive, now collapses to the narrow tunnel of grief. Without the imagined life that included the partner, tomorrow feels meaningless. Even the present becomes unbearable, because it is the only place where absence is undeniable. To escape, the mind retreats into two places: the idealized past or an imagined future of reunion. Both delay the painful work of living here and now. This is why people say time heals. It is not that the loss shrinks in importance, but that time gradually forces the rebuilding of perspective. The brain learns, slowly and painfully, to reorganize the story of past, present, and future without the lost person at its center. Healing comes when someone stops living inside the ghost of a relationship and begins writing new chapters for themselves. Still, before this renewal takes shape, the mind plays its last card, bargaining not only with the lost partner, but with the very structure of identity. Who am I without this connection? What do I have to offer the world without being half of a we? These questions cut deep, revealing how much of the self had been defined by belonging to another. The crisis of social identity is, in its own way, an invitation. It demands that the individual step out of the shadow of partnership and into the light of their own existence. Yet few recognize it as such in the moment. Most experience it as terror, a void that threatens to swallow them whole. And in a sense, it does. The old self, dependent on validation from another, dissolves. What remains is raw material, waiting to be shaped into something new. But whether that transformation occurs depends on choice. One can either cling to illusions, bargaining endlessly with memory and fantasy, or step toward the frightening but liberating work of redefining identity. It is at this crossroads that heartbreak reveals its double nature. On one side lies despair, repetition, and self-deception. On the other lies growth, authenticity, and the possibility of becoming whole. The departure of a loved one may ignite the storm, but within the storm lies the path to clarity. Standing at the edge of transformation, many people still wrestle with illusions of control. They replay memories, searching for hidden signs that things could have gone differently. They invent strategies, wondering if one more conversation, one more sacrifice, one more performance of worth might turn back time. Yet every effort circles the same truth. What is gone cannot be negotiated back into existence. The more the mind resists this truth, the more distorted time becomes. Hours stretch endlessly in the present, while the past glows with false perfection and the future feels like a void. The present is unbearable precisely because it is the only timeline where the absence is undeniable. To avoid this pain, people often dwell in daydreams of reunion or sink into nostalgia, clinging to fragments of memory as if they could anchor reality. But these escapes only prolong the torment, for they are not life, they are shadows of life. The turning point comes when someone accepts that the person they were before the loss no longer exists. The relationship did not just end, it reshaped identity. To heal is not to return to a previous version of oneself, but to build someone new. This is the essence of post-traumatic growth, the possibility that suffering, when fully confronted, becomes the foundation for strength. This growth does not happen automatically. It begins with uncomfortable questions. Why do I seek validation in unavailable places? What patterns have I repeated in choosing partners? What part of my identity was built on being desired rather than being whole? These questions pierce the illusions that defense mechanisms created, and facing them requires courage. But those who dare to face them often discover capacities they never imagined. Instead of bargaining, they begin learning emotional self-regulation. Instead of clinging to old identities, they explore passions and communities that reflect their authentic values. Some turn inward, practicing self-compassion and developing patience with their own pain. Others expand outward, building lives so rich and meaningful that future relationships can only complement rather than complete them. And here lies the most beautiful paradox of heartbreak. The very experience that once felt like annihilation can become liberation. People who once defined themselves by who loved them begin to discover who they truly are. They realize that no partner, however devoted, can substitute for a relationship with the self. The absence of another becomes the presence of possibility. The nervous system, once hijacked by survival alarms, gradually learns that solitude is not exile. It is a landscape where new strengths can be cultivated. Where once there was only fear of abandonment, now there can be resilience. Where once identity was fractured by loss, now it can be rebuilt with intention. The wound, though real, can become the place where light enters. Yet even in growth, the shadow of loss remains. Healing does not erase memory, it reshapes the relationship with it. The past no longer dictates the present, but informs it. Painful memories are no longer weapons that reopen the wound, but chapters in a larger story of becoming. In this way, heartbreak matures into wisdom. This wisdom is not abstract. It shows up in the ability to set boundaries without guilt, to recognize unhealthy dynamics sooner, to value one's own needs without apology. It manifests as clarity about what love truly means, not possession, not control, but mutual freedom. It is the understanding that authentic love can only exist between people who are whole in themselves. In the end, heartbreak is not just an emotional event. It is a full neurobiological storm, a psychological earthquake, and a social upheaval all at once. The nervous system, still carrying the wisdom of ancient survival, interprets abandonment as mortal danger. Defense mechanisms rise like barricades. Memories are rewritten. Time itself bends and twists. Every part of the human psyche is recruited in the struggle to make sense of the loss. Yet the very intensity of this response carries within it an extraordinary opportunity. The pain feels so overwhelming precisely because the bond mattered. To lose connection shakes us at the core, reminding us of the vulnerability that lies beneath our confidence. But vulnerability, when faced honestly, is also the birthplace of strength. By confronting it, rather than hiding from it, people learn resilience that no comfort could have taught. It is important to remember that the reactions to heartbreak, denial, bargaining, anger, obsession are not flaws of character. They are human responses to a system that equates separation with extinction. When someone lashes out, checks their phone compulsively, or pretends indifference while secretly unraveling, they are not revealing weakness. They are revealing humanity. Their nervous system is interpreting absence as threat, and it is doing its best to survive. This recognition allows for compassion, not only toward others, but toward oneself. Too often, people feel shame for their reactions, as though grief should be more dignified, more controlled. But grief does not obey logic. It is not a choice. It is a process. And within that process, messy as it is, lies the path toward renewal. Walking away from someone can feel cruel, but staying when love has already dissolved is often crueler still. To choose oneself is not selfishness, is honesty. A relationship built on denial or fear of loss cannot be authentic. By leaving, one affirms that true love can only exist when both people stand whole, able to give freely rather than from desperation. For the one left behind, this truth is harder to accept. But in time, many come to see the departure as a turning point. What once felt like betrayal begins to look like a strange kind of gift. Without the rupture, they might never have questioned their patterns, never rebuilt their sense of self, never discovered the depth of their resilience. Pain carved out space, and that space became room for growth. Healing does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean erasing love. It means integrating the experience into the larger arc of life. The lost relationship becomes part of the story, but no longer the whole story. The heart, once shattered, learns to beat with greater strength. The self, once fractured, emerges more authentic. And love, when it returns, is no longer about filling emptiness, but about sharing abundance. Perhaps the deepest lesson of heartbreak is this: We cannot love another into maturity, nor can we prevent their growth by staying. We cannot protect others from the lessons they must face, and we cannot sacrifice our own well-being to manage theirs. Every person must learn to regulate their own storms, to build their own foundation. To walk away is sometimes to allow that process to unfold. The wound of loss will always hurt. The echo of absence may never fully fade. But over time, what was once agony becomes memory, and memory becomes wisdom. From the ruins of one connection rises the possibility of many new ones, including the most important connection of all, the one with oneself. Heartbreak may begin as devastation, but it need not end there. Beneath the rubble lies the raw material for transformation. From the silence after goodbye can emerge a voice stronger, truer, and more compassionate than before. In choosing to face the pain rather than flee it, people discover not only that they can survive, but that they can grow into someone they never imagined becoming.